Dear church, let's talk about male spiritual leadership. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley, joined by Jovan Paez from California. You may have the record for the guest from the furthest location.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for joining me.
Exciting.
I appreciate you being here. Yeah. Thanks for taking time out of your day. Bakersfield, is that right?
Yeah, the Sunshine State, and Bakersfield seems to get all the sunshine. So we bake pretty well here. So
yeah, I bet you do. How long have you been in Bakersfield now?
Going on 9 years. 9 years.
9 years. Wow.
And it's been wonderful.
Yeah, tell us about your family.
Well, I've been married 22 years. We have a daughter who's wrapping up. We're going to transfer over to one of our local UC schools, and we have a 18-year-old son who just is going to graduate high school this week, and we have an 11-year-old boy who is growing faster than we can keep up with. And we have a good family. I'm blessed to have them, and they've been a phenomenal support to my life. So, and hopefully I've been similar to them. Yeah.
Well, we have a connection in that is it your in-laws that are here at Walnut Street?
Yes. My father-in-law and my mother-in-law, and then my brother-in-law also attends there with his family. So yeah, that's kind of neat. And
that's right.
They enjoy being there.
Yeah, the last time you were here, we talked about getting you on the podcast, and of course, we got to spend a little bit of time together, and we finally worked around to that. And the subject that I want to talk about is one that I know is near and dear to you, and that is male spiritual leadership. And this is not a podcast where we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the role of men versus the role of women necessarily, but just talking about the need for male spiritual leadership in the home and in the church. And I feel like that's under fire in our culture, and I'm sure you agree with that. That we hear terms being thrown around now like toxic masculinity and things of that nature, to where it seems like more and more our culture, our society wants to diminish male spiritual or male leadership in general. But talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about the need today for, more than ever perhaps, for male spiritual leadership and the benefits of that.
Yeah, that male spiritual leadership is something that's been a passion of mine since I became a Christian. And partly because, and this feeds into the question, and partly because while I had a father in my life, my father was not really there for me to guide me. And so it really led into a lot of, I filled the void with a lot of things. So gangs and drugs and other, promiscuous things that came along with that life. And when I became a Christian, I realized I began to have a really big need for guidance, and the scriptures were the primary source of my guidance. But it's also amazing when you see other individuals living it out, and over the years, it developed into a real understanding that we need leadership, we need guidance. And so, as you said, this is my look at this is not in terms of gender roles in the church, which is sometimes the immediate thought we think of with the phrase male spiritual leadership. But it's more about, and this is why it's needful, it's more about learning to lead in a spiritual way that influences others in spiritual ways, so that by your lifestyle, you can not only fill in voids like James talks about, to visit the widows and the fatherless in the times of their affliction, but also to be a mentor in your own home, to be a mentor in your own family, at work, at church, wherever. And the reason why, I think more than ever, is our society right now is really in turmoil over a series of things related to men and gender in a broader context. And one is men have, I think, I don't know if I want to use the word systematic, but it's kind of like the only word I can really use. Manhood has been treated as the source of so many problems in society. Chauvinism, I can agree to that, but manhood as a factor, masculinity in particular, toxic masculinity seems to go hand in hand with this idea. But the problem is there's also, not to get too political, but toxic, femininity. So it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter. But we as men who often have to deal with these unjust attacks have to also recognize that, look, in the midst of these pressures and the way we are looked at, it's more important than ever to focus on what does it mean to lead with spiritual integrity. We're not going to be perfect, and we're going to have real flaws. But how do we live in a world where, we have to be authentic about our flaws, but also make sure that we're part of the solution. And to be a part of the solution, you have to lead. You have to have influence. And if you're going to have influence, it has to be Jesus-drenched influence. When I was coming out of the streets, the manhood of Jesus, not just the human side of it, the manhood of Jesus really attracted me because he was someone, if I understood the Gospels right, could destroy everything because of his power. He didn't have to succumb, just on power, right? If all things being equal, let's just set aside the plan of God, the purpose of God. He can walk on water. He can raise the dead. He can make blind people see. At any moment, he could have lost it when he was rejected. At any moment, he could have been just toxic with that power, but he wasn't. And he showed gentleness in moments of need. He showed strength in moments that demanded it. And that's the kind of integrity we need to have as people of God, men of God. So I think it's massively needed.
Yeah, totally.
Because
Totally agree. Would you say that the time that you spent on the streets in a gang, would you say that was trying to fill that you had a void that was being filled there, that you really didn't know kind of what it is you were looking for, and then once you left that lifestyle, became a Christian, is when you really realized that, oh, okay, there's something more here, and it starts with that headship, that leadership, divinely, but also then from a humanly standpoint.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So one thing, and looking back retrospectively at all of that, it is probably one of the key factors in gang identity, the group identity, is that there are leaders and there are sort of proteges. So you have the mentor mentee, whether it's being the muscle, whether it's being sort of the street, pharmacist, if I use that word.
Right.
There is that, but it's also the identity of identity. We are part of this neighborhood. We are a part of each other. And I learned real quickly that a lot of us that were out there lacked influential fathers, lacked influential parents, because from a strictly, cultural perspective, a lot of us were children of immigrant parents. So a lot of our parents had to work many shifts, many jobs. So a parentless household, out of necessity, created a lack of structure. And the lack of structure then was a void that needed to be filled. And I grew up in a single parent household, and my father was in the army. He was gone a lot. And then there was a divorce. So I didn't have him a lot. And my mother had to work long shifts. It became very easy for me. And that bond was a felt need. And it was a real need. You know, it was an emotional need. It was a physical need. It was a bonding need, or a need of bonding. And so, yeah, definitely. We underrate, I think, or undervalue the emotional ties that are created out there. And then leaving that, one of the hardest things that I went through as a new Christian from that kind of culture was, I had to then refill the void, because I lost mentors, I lost friends, I lost all kinds of things, strictly because I wasn't going to go to the neighborhood, strictly because I wasn't going to even, touch the hem of the garment of the streets, kind of thing. And so, you start craving, where do I go next? What's next? What do you do next? When I realized I wanted to do ministry, I didn't have a word for it. I went to my preacher and I said, "Hey, I want to do this. How do I do this?" He goes, "What do you mean by this?" Like, what, like teaching and like speaking. He goes, "Oh, ministry and preaching." I didn't even have the vocabulary for it. And
Yeah.
and so, there are steps we assume are just going to happen, but without guidance, there's no leadership, and without leadership, we're wandering sheep.
When was that moment, Jovan, that you realized, you know what, I've got to get out of this. I've got to do something different with my life. And what was that? What was that pivotal moment where you decided that you're going to leave that behind?
Well, it was a cumulative effect of a variety of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, it started off like a normal day, and which means I was in the streets, probably as early as, I don't know, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. And, I already had, skipped school. I mean, I was a freshman in high school for like 3 years. Um, and,
Mm-hmm.
and just one day after, I wanted to go and get away from the streets. I really just wanted to get away. And we all felt that every now and then. We just want to go somewhere to a park and medicate. And
Mm-hmm.
this time I was by myself, and I began to think through it. And it was literally, I was really at a intersection of life, and in my neighborhood, on my block, on my corner. And I said, if I go this way by myself, I'm going to, number one, you don't really walk in the streets by yourself. It's a bad rule. Don't do that. Number two, I thought I'd go a different
Yeah.
direction, but I was worried I might get shot, I might get beat up, I might get identified by a rival gang. And I started slowly, just every avenue began to be a symbol of the corner I was painting myself in. And I realized that I was facing death, violence in my family. And it just really struck me. And I just remember saying, man, you know, this is leading me to like hell. This is leading me to death. I don't, and I just remember praying to God. I said, God, I'm going to start looking for you. I don't really know how to do this prayer thing. I grew up Catholic, so all I knew how to do was recite prayers. I really didn't have a prayer life. And I just remember saying, God, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to start looking for you. And if you can find
Yeah.
me, you meet me halfway. I mean, this is the prayer. This is what I said. If you can meet me halfway, find
Sure.
me, because I'm going to be looking for you. Please. and I left the streets that day, never came back.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
when
That's,
you are a part of, um, I sang from the streets and I was in gangs and I did things. I know there are people who were deeper in than I was. And I want to put that in perspective. But I was, connected to the pimps and prostitute racket. I was close to people who were big dealers. I was involved with things that, you see. I saw a girl call home that telling her parents she was going to be a prostitute.
yeah.
This guy's going to take care of me. And I'm like, he's not going to take care of you. We're going to make money.
Yeah.
He's going to make money, and you will be an addict stuck in one of these apartments. And so when
Hmm.
you begin to realize the devil in you, that's what I realized. That I
Yeah.
was part of the boogeyman system of the streets that parents would keep their kids home, because I heard it and I saw it. We used to just occupy people's front steps, and you'd see them coming in with their groceries and their kids, just telling their kids to be quiet and walk through, and um, you really realize you're losing your humanity. So
Yeah.
when I saw that in me and I knew death was looming, that's when I decided that I'm going to look for God. And I don't know how soon after, I found a Bible under my bed and I started reading it.
Wow. Wow.
I don't, yeah.
That's, yeah. That's incredible. Joel, what, have you had an opportunity to speak to any of those guys in your role now on the other side of things as a minister? Have you had a chance to speak to any of those guys that you formerly were in a gang with or anything?
Yeah, yeah. I have. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Early on when I still kind of had that street cred. I It was intriguing to some, but
Hmm.
when they learned that you couldn't be promiscuous anymore, and they knew they couldn't do these, they were like, no, that's not for me. When they knew they
Yeah.
had to change their life, they said it's not for me. Um,
Yeah.
because a lot of people, when we're out there, we appeal to God. God, we don't want to die right now. God, we don't want to, you know. I was watching a movie the other day and the guy said, I'm so scared I'm thinking about God. And that's kind of what it's like out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but, but I've had a few cases, where we've had opportunities where I plant a seed and I've been able to baptize them, from different walks of life, but a couple from the streets. And after a 10-year stretch, a buddy of mine, I got to baptize him, and he ended up going into ministry. And I've been working on his brother. I've been, working on different people. Um, but there was a time when they didn't quite understand what I was doing. They thought it was a rejection of our bond. They translated it as a rejection of our
Yeah.
bond as friends. But um, So not giving up on doing it is just, little by little, one by one if I have to. But there have been successes. So yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hey, talk a little bit about what you see as marks of an effective male spiritual leader. What defines
Mm.
that great male spiritual leader?
Well, I think part of I'm going to borrow some. We have a workshop here at Highland. We do it every year, and I have a friend of mine that speaks often on the leader of one, uh,
Hmm.
and I think, and the principle behind that is a great leader is a leader who has worked on leading himself, in
Okay.
the sense that they're taking interest. They're taking inventory. They have sort of they're building a legacy of integrity that at some point we've all been followers, but we've also taken steps to get our hands dirty, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's at church, whether anywhere. And I think that is essential. That is someone who's doing the work of something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, publicly seen. But the fact that the person is looking in the mirror and going, okay, today I'm going to do one more thing. Today I'm going to build on what I've been working on, whether it's working on my pornography problem, working on my anger problem, working on my lack of spiritual discipline problem, whether it is. So that's the first thing, that they're doing the work. And out of that comes a couple of other things. And the second thing I'd say is integrity. And I talk about spiritual leadership as a matter of spiritual integrity, which means while we don't have to go about talking about our particular actual temptations, right? I don't have to throw out my list, my rap sheet, so to speak. It is important that a leader show I'm not perfect. I think there's been sort of a crisis of leadership because we believe a leader has to be perfect. We may not say that, but if we kind of find a flaw in a leader, somehow we lose confidence in them. And I think it's really important that we understand that leaders, especially in the church, need the gospel just as much as the people they preach to, need the gospel just as much as the people they serve, and need the gospel just as much. And so that is a bridge of integrity that is essential in spiritual leadership. I need Jesus. I've had my come to Jesus moment. I may not be comfortable sharing all my dark secrets. Me personally, I've had to chase my dark secrets because of where I've come from, because I was a street kid. That's often outpaced my spiritual development. And that also brings me to another point of this. Authentic leadership that acknowledges personal struggles, gives you an environment, gives you sort of a theater of war, so to speak, an arena where you can taper down skill versus character. Let me explain.
Yeah.
So sometimes people are skilled, right? They're gifted with skills, crafted, and yet they don't really have the integrity yet to use those in public environments. So sometimes we see great leaders with great skill, and sometimes they fall into these moral problems, moral traps. I have a high suspicion that part of the reason why is because their skills outpace their character development.
Yeah.
And so if we can be authentic, working on our own things, and then not being afraid to have broken feet, right? Or have glass feet or fractured feet or whatever the phrase is. That allows us then to be authentic with people around us. And if you're going to lead, you need that kind of influence.
Absolutely. Love it. So what can the church do, Jovan? What can the church do to help develop these leaders? Because I think what you're talking about is not confined just to the church or the home. It's in every realm of life, but certainly those two areas is what God has designated for male spiritual leadership. The onus is on us to be that leader. So what can the church do to develop that?
Well, we need to, I might get in trouble here, but it's okay. I really believe that it starts there's a systemic issue in how we talk about spiritual leadership. sometimes the church is very uncomfortable with the word leadership, and when we apply it to everyone, okay, moms are
Right.
leaders,
Yes.
sisters in Christ are leaders, but we shy because we shy away from that language because of our concerns about gender roles in the assembly and in church leadership and all that other stuff, which is an important topic. But
For sure.
we're not going to sidebar it. We're just going to
Mhm.
put it aside right now. So I think
Yeah.
we need to start getting comfortable recognizing that spirituality is a service focused kind of industry. It's
Hmm.
a spirituality is a service focused component of our lives that require us to lead in it. That's why there's that cool catchphrase, servant leadership, right? And the
Hmm.
church, I think, in order to assist, and I think there are a lot of good places that are this is happening. But if we talk more about it, more places will do this. I think one of the things the church can do to help is is reinforce, go back to basics, where we have older women leading younger women, older men
Hmm.
leading younger men, rebuilding the intergenerational relationships that our culture and society at large really have splintered and shattered. You
Yeah.
cannot solve relational problems non interrelationally. That word doesn't even exist. I
Right.
just made it up. But you cannot hold hands without fingers,
Hmm.
right? You
Yeah.
cannot hold hands without fingers.
Right.
And we're trying to do this without fingers. We're trying to build relationships without relationships. And if we're going to really strike at this issue hard the way it needs to, the church needs to become or return or restore community, community of
Yeah.
God that embraces. I love this phrase. It's from Larry Crabb's book, "The Safest Place on Earth." It's about the church. He called this book called the Safest Place on Earth. Larry Crabb says that we need to be able to be a church where we can turn our pews toward each other. Because
Yeah.
at church, our pews are facing outward, away from each other, and it's really easy to get caught into a movie theater kind of framework. Well, I go to the movies. I don't know who I'm going to the
Right.
movies with, unless you came with me. That's it. But if we kind of turn
Yep.
our pews toward each other and celebrate each other for, hey, I'm so thankful you're here. How can I be of service to you? Like, relationship creates the webs of service that create leadership.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing we can do. Big picture.
Oh, yeah. Really good stuff. So talk about a few resources maybe that are out there that people can plug into to help with this. I know you guys have the leadership conference. I've watched some of that online. I think it's great. You have some guys that I love and respect as well that come to that and who participate in that. But talk about some other resources that maybe are out there for people to look into.
Um, yeah, I actually have a couple books that I brought to maybe suggest. Um,
Awesome.
there are two. I don't know where my other book. One book that I wanted to show I can't find, but I'll just mention it. But the first book I want to share is this book, The Leadership Challenge, The Christian Reflections on the Leadership Challenge by Koussis and Posner.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you're
Okay.
familiar with their work, but they've done a deep, detailed study of effective dynamics of leadership. But and it's a massive book. This one is a reflection on by Christian leaders, in the broader Christendom world, on these principles.
Hmm.
And this was at first like a required reading in a class I had, but it has been just I think essential. I think this is essential reading. because it talks about areas that
Okay.
we can all challenge. It's a big picture of all the different tentacles of how we can lead others and serve others and celebrate others. Because leadership, sometimes we think it's about the leader, but leadership is really about the people around you. That's a really
Yeah.
great book. Another book that I've probably read this at least 20 times is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick
Okay.
Lencioni. And because a leader needs to kind of understand the dynamics of a team, and it's really helpful for interpersonal relationships. And some of the things that come up are things like what breaks down in a team? Trust. What breaks down in a team? Communication. What breaks down in a team? Support. That's not my job. I don't have to do that. We see that with our
Right.
kids. We see that at church. We see that at work. And so I really think it's a really powerful book. A book that I really like, surprisingly, came across this guy, and my family loves Disney, and I started
Hmm.
reading books by Marty Sklar. He was kind of the voice of Disney. He helped Disney craft sayings and statements, and a lot of things that kind of Disney said. He helped coin them and phrase them. But one thing he does is in a lot of his books, he talks about sometimes the appreciating the magic of creativity that a good leader can bring when you trust people, you give them jobs and you trust them, and leadership sometimes feels we have to micromanage others,
Hmm.
and and that's really unhealthy, and it becomes a codependent problem. Their success is my
Right.
success, and therefore, if they fail, I fail. That's not a very healthy way to lead. And a book that I'm just starting to read, it's been out for a little bit, but I've really enjoyed it so far, is Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. He
Yeah.
he he's a I love listening to him on TikTok or wherever his stuff is out, but it's really Leaders Eat Last. It starts off about how uh, in the army, not army, but I forget what branch it was in the military, but he saw how Marines. He saw how the Marines of a higher rank allow the people of lower rank eat first, and the principle out of that
Okay.
came: leaders look out for the developing ones, and then they eat last because they've already developed, and they really let. And I think mentoring other people, giving them opportunities, supporting them, and so I'm really enjoying this read right now. So that's that's what I'd recommend. The last book that I don't have for some reason, I must have lent it out to someone, was Relaunch by Mark Rutland. How to
Okay.
stage an organizational comeback. Um, and I like it so much because he talks about the practical nuts and bolts of personal development and how it affects organizational development. So those are the books I'd
Okay.
really recommend.
Love it. Yeah. Hey, Jovan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, for being on and talking about this. It's so much respect for you and what you're doing there in California. And I hope you'll consider coming on with us another time.
Yeah, I'd love to. I appreciate it, Chris. Really enjoyed this. So much to talk about, and I appreciate what you're doing with the podcast. And take care of my mom and dad out there.
I sure will. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in as well. Our listeners, our viewers. I want to tell you, if you have a question about today's episode or a comment, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a question specifically for Jovan, we'll make sure that gets passed on to him, and I'm sure he'll be glad to answer any kind of questions you might have. We just thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.